Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to discuss Bitcoin breaking out and setting a new all-time high yesterday, and then the rejection that we've seen back down to the mid-range, which should be no surprise to viewers of the channel. We're also going to touch on XRP and how price action's been playing out over the last week, and we're going to look back at examples from the past on how XRP's price action is playing out just like it did towards the end of June. We're also going to have a look at ADA and touch on what we spoke about on Tuesday when we said that price would pump to the upside here like it did back in 2021, and that it was likely at some point we would see a very sharp rejection on ADA before it consolidated and could move up higher. On top of that, we're going to tie in the Bitcoin dominance here, how it's still continuing to break down, and we're going to touch on the stock market briefly and have a look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average here, which is just inching towards a breakout, which viewers of the channel should know how bullish this is for Bitcoin. And then to wrap up the video, we're going to have a look at how the altcoin market's playing out, as we have just taken out the December highs, and in the last 24 hours seen the altcoin market just less than 2% from taking out its previous all-time high set back in 2021. So lots to jump into in today's video, guys. Let's jump into it. So firstly, we'll have a look at Bitcoin here, and as you can see, yesterday Bitcoin did break out and set a new all-time high here, with Bitcoin's price reaching almost 125,000, and since then we have seen a sharp rejection. Now previously in the past, if we have a look at Bitcoin on higher time frames here, we have discussed how Bitcoin loves to reject once reaching an all-time high, and examples that we've looked at are back here during the 2024 correction, where you can see this blue line was Bitcoin's previous all-time high set back in 2021. And then just like the way price is playing out now, we did see Bitcoin's price break out and then instantly reject back down before going into that prolonged ABC correction. Then earlier in this year, in May, we spent months discussing that. We're seeing the same thing play out here, where the all-time high from December and January was taken out, and then Bitcoin rejected instantly from that back down to its mid-range, went into an ABC correction, and now just like we've seen in the past, Bitcoin's price is reacting very similar. However, as we are in late stages of the market, this is all playing out a lot faster, and I believe we've already seen the first wave down in Bitcoin's breakdown here, straight back down to the mid-range, and I think things will play out like they did in the past, where you can see in previous ABC corrections for Bitcoin, once setting new all-time highs, price did pull straight back down to this mid-range here, and that once we eventually bounced around in this zone, we did see the lows get swept and then price continued to move to the upside. So I think for Bitcoin right now, we are sitting roughly in this mid zone here. However, things are going to play out a lot faster at this late stage in the cycle. And I think once we see this zone get swept in an ABC correction kind of fashion, we will most likely find the bottom for Bitcoin and then continue to move higher. So as far as where I'm looking at for Bitcoin to bounce, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Bitcoin bounce off the support regions here at 115,000 before then continuing higher. One more thing I also wanted to touch on here, guys, in regards to Bitcoin, is that we could actually see price just move out straight from these levels and continue to follow the M2 money supply, which does have us moving to about 135,000. And that instead of forming some kind of consolidation base here, what we could end up seeing is Bitcoin's price just shoot back to the upside and break out, which lines us up with what I see playing out here on XRP. So when we have a look at the XRP price chart, there's essentially two scenarios that I see playing out. And the first scenario is that we are in a similar situation to the way price reacted back in June earlier this year, where XRP was in this consolidation phase, and then it eventually ended up doing an ABC correction before being able to work its way out and break to the upside. And I could see us being in some shortened version of that here, where we could see XRP's price reject from the top of this trend line again, come down and give us those lows before then shooting to the upside, consolidating, maybe breaking higher, back testing, and then working its way up and out the same way it did back during this time down here. And the reason I think that XRP may go lower from where today's current price levels are is that you can see when XRP ended up finding its bottom down in here, that was based off the sweep of this low from where price pushed out from the tariff scare and the bottom of this wick. And if we have a look at the way that today's price chart looks, you can see that this wick here is somewhat identical, and this would be the bottom of that range that XRP had broken out from and then ended up back testing, which is why I can see this scenario playing out. However, if Bitcoin is to just break out from this range here, not consolidate and just break to the upside on the back of positive news coming out, what I could see playing out for XRP is something quite similar like we discussed in videos earlier this week, where at some point what we were looking for XRP was this boring chop until it eventually got a bid broke out from the upside and then actually came back and retested the mid-range. And I know this looks crazy to a lot of people, but this actually ties into what I see playing out here on ADA. Now, in Wednesday's video on ADA, price was sitting roughly at these levels, and what we discussed was that we were looking for ADA to actually move out to those $1.30 highs, sweep these highs set back here in November, and it would be somewhat of an aggressive push all the way back up, but that at some point price would come slamming all the way back down, just like it did back in 2021. Now, if you didn't catch that video, this is essentially what we discussed, where what I believe that we seen last year in November for ADA was the similar way price reacted here in August of 2020, and that once ADA went into this consolidation range, it eventually broke to the upside. And I do believe that what we've seen so far right now is this initial break to the upside, and what we're seeing at the moment is potentially a stall out right here, which ADA then went on after stalling out in this zone right here to push to the upside and then eventually come back and violently backtest, which if we tie this back to how we see price potentially playing out on XRP, that does line up with the XRP thesis, which then takes us to total 2 here, which is the total market cap of crypto excluding Bitcoin, essentially all of the altcoins. And what we did discuss playing out here was the total 2 actually pushing higher and then backtesting its previous all-time high, not the previous high, but actually the high set back in 2021, which is marked by this black line here at about 1.7 trillion. And this is all happening while we do have the Bitcoin dominance breaking down still. It is consolidating at this area, which is all to be expected, as earlier in the week I did think the Bitcoin dominance would shoot a little bit higher, then come back down to this support level, consolidate, and then break down. But it looks like we have just had the breakdown. We should see some consolidation here before then we can see the Bitcoin dominance break down. But all in all, we're seeing exactly what we want to see here. And as long as this Bitcoin dominance continues to break down and we don't see this 62% level reclaimed, everything's playing out just like we want to see in an alt season. We have now just backtested the consolidation range on total 2, and that it wouldn't be surprising if we do see price bounce from here. That's why when I look at ADA, I think we could bounce from here, that we might not see price go any lower. And on XRP, I do think we could bounce from these levels too, especially if we see 222 reclaimed. However, I am 50-50 on if we will see price push a little bit lower before we see the reclaim, or we'll see the reclaim first. But having a look at total 2, it looks pretty clean so far. But if total 2 was to break down from this level, it would most likely find support at this level before consolidating and then shooting up higher. So guys, pretty exciting time in the market. You can tell we're getting to these final stages of the market cycle. When Bitcoin took out this high yesterday, there was a lot of excitement on X and there was a lot of people talking about Bitcoin. However, to see Bitcoin's price reject straight back down to the mid-range should be no surprise to viewers of the channel. As like touched on previously, when we've seen the all-time high taken out in this move up, where does Bitcoin's price pull back to? This very same mid-range. But I don't expect Bitcoin to take 6 months like it did back in 2024 to do this ABC correction. And I don't expect it to take 2 months like it did earlier in this year to do this ABC correction. This should all happen very, very fast. And if we have a look over here at the Fed Watch Tool, you can see that there's 32 days until the next cut. And it's now purported that there is still a 92% chance that the Fed is going to cut rates. I actually looked at this earlier in the day, and it was a 99% chance that they were going to cut rates and a 1% chance that they were going to do 2 rate cuts at the next meeting. So it's looking very, very likely that the Fed is going to cut rates in 33 days on the 17th of September. And this doesn't mean that the market's going to crash, because initially a lot of the crowd, a lot of retail, a lot of new people to crypto are going to think that this is really bullish, and that as soon as they start cutting rates, that means that they can turn the money printer on and stimulate the economy, and it's going to be really exciting. So we should see some short-term euphoria when they actually do cut rates. However, like discussed in previous videos, rate cuts have never been good for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and therefore probably not too good for Bitcoin either. And that as soon as they start cutting rates, the market doesn't dump, but by the time they have finished cutting rates and rates have bottomed here, we have seen 40% crashes, 53% crashes, 40% crashes. All of these crashes have names: the 2000 bubble pop, the GFC, COVID lockdowns. However, they all came at the same time. So I do think if they do start cutting rates on the 17th of September, we could probably still expect price to go up and some short-term euphoria. However, by the time they're cutting rates, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a new name and a new news event that ends up crashing the market by the time we see rates back down at the lows. But for the next 30 to 40 days, we should be seeing some excitement here in the market. We definitely should see the Bitcoin dominance continue to break down. We should see a lot of the altcoins get through these consolidation ranges before then eventually breaking to the upside, just like ADA did back in 2021. And we should start to see things things play out like that for XRP. But we are just now closing out the week of a pretty successful week here for crypto. There is this meeting happening in the next 24 hours, so it should be pretty interesting to see what comes of this. If it does end up being negative, I do think that will be the news event that gives us the flush in the market that we're looking for. If it ends up being positive, this is ultimately what will end up shooting price back above these consolidation ranges that we talked about. So it should be pretty exciting to see how all of this ends up playing out. So guys, thank you for watching this video. If you made it this far, please leave a like. If you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe down below. If you have any questions about what we discussed today, drop them down below in the comment section. I hope everyone's ready for what comes next, and I can just feel it day by day. We are just inching closer to that alt season, so some very exciting times coming up ahead, and I'll be here to keep you guys in the loop and let you know how all of this plays out. So until next time, have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next video.